Let's think about this for a moment. The United States is in debt, the European Union is in debt, Japan is in debt, even Germany and China are in debt. So if everyone is in debt, who are all these countries borrowing from? This question may sound simple, but it actually points to one of the biggest secrets of the modern financial world. So let's dive deeper and follow the trail of this money. Here's the number in front of you, $315 trillion. Hard to pronounce, even harder to count the zeros. This is the total amount of debt on the planet. Take the entire global economy and almost triple it. That's the scale we're talking about. Just imagining it is insane. And this brings us to the core paradox of our analysis. If every government, every company, and almost every one of us is in debt, then who is on the other side of the equation? Who is the creditor? Who does everyone owe money to? Let's solve this mystery together. First, we need to understand one thing. Debt is not just a burden or something inherently bad. Debt is also the hidden architecture of the modern world. Every war, every major project, every period of economic growth has been built on this invisible web of debt. Government debt was originally created to finance wars. Imagine this, in 1694, England is at war with France, and the treasury is empty. Gold is gone. There's an army, but no money. So the king turns not to bankers, but to merchants and says, "Give us money now and we'll pay you interest in the future, guaranteed by taxes." That simple idea gave birth to government bonds in the modern financial system. The ability to borrow suddenly became the ability to govern. So who are these creditors? To answer that, let's take a closer look at the world's biggest debtor, the United States. This is where it gets interesting. Most people immediately think of foreign countries, right? But the reality is very different. About 2/3 of U.S. public debt, the lion's share, is held by Americans themselves. Yes, you heard that right. Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third is held by foreigners. And at the top of that list is a country that may surprise many people, Japan, with roughly $1 trillion in U.S. debt. China comes next, followed by the United Kingdom. This corrects one of the most common misconceptions. Yes, the U.S. owes money to China. That's true. But it's only a small piece of a much larger picture. This is our first big wow moment. The system works like this. The U.S. Treasury issues bonds. American banks and funds buy them. Americans pay taxes. The government uses those taxes to pay interest on the bonds, and that interest flows right back into Americans' pension accounts. The debt is real, but the creditor is essentially a reflection of the system itself. Now let's zoom out. This isn't unique to the United States. It's a tightly interconnected global system, functioning almost like a giant game of hot potato. The global cycle roughly works like this. Japan buys U.S. Treasury bonds and lends money to the U.S. The U.M., through institutions like the IMF, lends money to Europe. Europe, through channels like the World Bank, lends to developing countries. And then what happens? Those countries invest their earned foreign reserves back into Western bonds, restarting the cycle. In other words, they end up lending money back to the developed economies. Everyone is connected. The core logic of the system is this. Imagine a massive poker table where everyone owes everyone else money. And there's only one rule that keeps the game alive. No one gets up from the table. And now we arrive at the strangest, most mind-bending secret of government debt. Ready? These debts were never designed to be fully repaid. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to pay back every last dollar of the principal. But governments play by different rules. They manage debt like a constantly renewing subscription. When old bonds mature, they issue new bonds to pay them off. Debt is paid with more debt. Economists call this rolling over. The debt, or refinancing. Here's the critical point. The goal isn't to eliminate the debt. The goal is to pay interest regularly and convince investors to keep lending to you. Interest is like rent paid to keep the system stable. And here lies the biggest paradox. Imagine a government announcing, "We're paying off all our debt." What would happen? Government bonds, considered the safest financial asset in the world, would disappear. Pension funds and banks would lose their strongest foundation. Paying off the debt entirely would be like knocking down the main pillar holding the economy up. So what fuels this system? Trust. Nothing else but trust. And what happens when that trust starts to crack? That's when things get serious. We've seen the real-world consequences of these abstract ideas many times. In Greece, bailout packages meant sacrificing an entire generation's future. In Sri Lanka, a debt crisis pushed the country into political chaos. When trust breaks, ordinary people always pay the price. So what are we left with? A massive global engine built entirely on trust. Now let's summarize what this engine really means for society. At its core, debt has become the heartbeat of global capitalism. It keeps the system alive by pumping money into pension funds, mortgages, and financial markets across the world. That's why, when politicians talk about balancing budgets or completely paying off debt, they're selling an illusion. The real goal is to keep the heart beating. But there's another effect of this system. It constantly transfers wealth upward. How? Interest payments flow from ordinary people, who fund the system through taxes, to large institutions and wealthy investors who hold the debt. Now we can better understand why global debt and global inequality always seem to rise together. This may be the clearest summary of the system's hidden logic. Everything depends on the system continuing to believe in itself. As long as that belief holds, the size of the numbers no longer matters. And I'll leave you with this final thought. This massive global structure rests on an abstract concept called trust. But if that trust ever runs out, does the heartbeat of capitalism stop? That's a question all of us should be thinking about.